Natalia Martinez-Kalinina. She embodies the quote, "Leadership is the art of giving people a platform for spreading ideas that work." In MiamiTech, Natalia has been a true leader, helping create the infrastructure that has allowed a tech ecosystem to develop and scale up in Miami. Natalia, until recently, led the expansion of the Cambridge Innovation Center, CIC, to Miami. CIC is the oldest, most successful, most respected, and largest innovation hub in the United States. Also, Natalia Martinez-Kalinina founded the Awesome Foundation Miami, the local chapter of a global network of grassroots micro-grant giving hubs. Natalia co-founded Aminta Ventures, a group aimed at educating and empowering women to become angel investors. She also serves as the Vice President of Latin American expansion of the Latino Startup Alliance, and she is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and World Economic Forum communities. And Natalia Martinez-Kalinina is here with us today at Aquí y Ahora, podcast sponsored by PAG Law, experts in venture capital throughout the Americas, for a conversation with its founder, Juan Pablo Cappello. With you, Natalia Martinez-Kalinina y Juan Pablo Cappello.
Natalia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, hey, I don't normally start off by asking what's up, but given the news that after 5 grand successful years at the CIC, where you've literally helped write the history of MiamiTech. I mean, I think there's probably even more so than the lab, before and after of the CIC getting launched, and the incredible work you guys did. I think everyone's interested. What's Natalia Martinez? I don't know if it's 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, but I know there's a new operating system being developed.
New operating system, totally. So, I mean, I think, and you and I have known each other for some years now, so I think this answer may come as a surprise because I'm definitely a planner and a thinker through overall, both personally and professionally. My current answer is that I don't entirely know. I made the decision. Yeah, I don't entirely know. So I made this decision a while back in January of this year. And so we've been planning the succession and organizing around that. Obviously, having run any project for 5 years, and especially a project that has, a lot of moving parts, and some of them are physical and some of them are diplomatic and partnership driven and clients, and there's a lot to hand off. And so I wanted to make sure that I was trying to do it as responsibly as possible. COVID threw a couple of wrenches in that process, but here we are. What process has it not thrown wrenches into? So this was no exception. But yeah, so I am a week out from my last.
Wow.
A week after my last day was June 30th. So I feel good. I'm so proud of what we've built. I feel really excited for the next chapter.
Brag for a minute about what you guys built for the people who don't know, because it is really amazing.
So yeah, I mean, CIC, I think it is really amazing, and thank you for saying that. It's been absolutely a labor of love. CIC came to Miami. I've been in this project for 5 years, but we officially opened probably 4 years ago because we spent a year building and organizing. The physical piece of what we built, and you've been to the space, is about 80,000 square feet of what we think of as the anchor point of the upcoming innovation district. So the real focus of the project is activating and master planning and executing this much larger parcel of land in partnership with the University of Miami, in partnership with other institutions, public and private, to hopefully be not the only one, because there's absolutely no reason why a major city should have only one center of gravity, but be a center of gravity for entrepreneurship, innovation, all of those things. And so we have the physical pieces, the most simple thing that we've done, right? We have office space and co-working space and laboratories, which I always think are the most exciting part because you have, really interesting scientific research commercializing as you walk around the hallways. And so there's a physical piece. And then the bulk of what we've done is all of the other stuff. So not just, how do we advise the 250 client companies that are based there? How do we help them grow? How do we help them, elevate the bar, which is always a topic that I know is also dear to your heart when we look at the Miami ecosystem. So how do we raise the bar? How do we build and help build more competitive companies regionally, locally, globally, et cetera? And then just a lot of the other stuff is partnership driven and program driven.
And why don't you talk, because a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are one of the audience are entrepreneurs in LatAm who are thinking about coming to Miami. Mm-hmm. And especially given, their government's response to this latest crisis, even more so. So yeah, I know you guys have a soft landing kind of program.
Absolutely. And so when we first started, and because we're not a real estate play, not that there would be anything wrong with that, but we're trying to activate and kind of create a center of gravity for a city. And Miami's unique in some ways, but it's not in a lot of other ways in comparison to other cities. When I started, I kind of mapped out what our large strategic pillars would be. And one of them, and this is unique to Miami, was this idea of how do we better engage with the region, right? Miami, what we promise and what we deliver, and how do we do that better? And so as a result, we've done various iterations of this. We had a pilot and then a more robust kind of Latin American, call it kind of a Latin America desk program. Mm-hmm. So there's a set of free offerings to any entrepreneur that is coming from the region in terms of kind of access to the space for meetings, access to our team if they need some help, a lot of kind of logistical assistance with a couple of different pieces. So there's free soft landing. I would say like basic soft landing support is offered for free to almost any, I would say, entrepreneur coming, especially those coming from our partners. And then there's a set of partnerships that we have in the region, usually most of them focused across 5 countries, that engage deeper in some form of tangible and bidirectional exchange. And so those partnerships are everything from how do we get more investment flowing there and back? How do we connect life sciences ecosystems, for example, between Miami and, I don't know, like Colombia, things like that. And so it's been really, and now we are recently in the process of launching a little bit of a more kind of robust accelerator-like program where companies that are looking to commercialize can participate virtually or in person in a actual kind of multi-week program that helps them figure out if their company's ready to commercialize abroad and how to best do so. And so that's done in partnership with a couple of other institutions.
Well, circling back to what you said, I found super interesting, and it's definitely something I've struggled with. That sort of, you have to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Like, you had been there 5 years. You guys have accomplished a huge amount. And I'm sure, part of you sort of felt like, wow, this is great. And, I could continue to be part of this, great project for a lot longer. But obviously, you sort of proactively decided that, it may be the time to sort of hand things off. And that's something, with the lab or Miami Angels or a bunch of initiatives that I'm involved in, sometimes I feel it's like the mafia. Like I try to get out and then something happens and I end up getting sucked back in. I mean, how was your decision making, et cetera, in terms of trying to create some additional space to do other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree transitions of and I use power very loosely, right? It's not like we're presidents here. We're not like leading countries, right? But transitions of leadership. Yeah, I'm like, let me caveat this so that I don't sound much more arrogant than I am. But let's just say transitions of leadership, right? They're always complicated. There's always pieces about those handoffs that work well. There's pieces about those handoffs that could always work better. I think for me, it felt really important to create space for me to feel kind of whatever emotions came up as I was doing this process, right? Because there are different moments. There are moments where you feel stressed.
Sorry to interrupt, but how? I mean, how do you, make that leap that I'm going to let go of this. Project that I've helped steer, and in part, I imagine, for 2 reasons. One, because it's going to, create space to, force, I'm talking about myself, you know, when I've
Sure.
thought about it, like one, it's going to sort of force me to figure out what comes next. And then two, you know, a lot of times I feel like after, you know, 4 or 5 years, I've sort of given it all my fresh ideas, and it's time to let somebody else come at this and, you know, with a fresh look and maybe bring ideas I'm just, you know, too close to come up with.
So I very much agree with the latter part of this. To me, part of the benefit of hopefully doing leadership transitions well, and this was for me absolutely one of the things that was very close to my heart. You know, after 5 years, after any number, different people have different cutoff points, right? Like some people start to check out 2 years in. This was not my case. I feel, you know, I was working really intensely. I've loved this project. I love our impact. I feel really great about it. But at a certain point, you start to notice, and at least in my case, I start to notice like certain, you know, less energy for certain things or less creativity for certain things. And for me, like, part of that is thinking through, okay, is this a pattern? Is this a moment? Am I just tired? Is there a particular incongruence between me and the work that I'm doing? And the answer to that may be some of the above, all of the above, none of the above, right? Like it depends on the project. But to me, the big signal is I don't want to be doing anything out of inertia, especially not at this stage in my career, right? Like I want to be doing things that feel really challenging and that feel novel in that challenge. And something can feel challenging and not novel, and that feels less exciting to me at this particular point. And so I thought the project was amazing. I still deeply believe in our mission. I deeply believe in this next chapter. I'm excited to stay along, you know, as a client, which I'm staying. But I didn't feel like I was contributing to the same caliber that I had been contributing. And to me, a lot of that boils down to what you said. Could a new person offer a different process for this, a different way of looking at these questions, a different revisit of, I don't know, everything from team dynamics to partnerships. And it can be really great for projects to have that breath of fresh air. For me, I think because I cared about the project, that made sense.
And do you have, and sorry for, you know, my naivete, do you have a board?
No.
No? Okay. Yeah. Cause I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, you know, a lot of times when I'm on boards of things, you know, that's where, you know, we start feeling like, hey, the person's great. But again, for me, it's normally that sort of 5-year milestone where it's like, you know, we have to, and you know, and quite honestly, I mean, you've seen a transition in Endeavor about a year ago, sort of 5 years in at the lab. It was about 4 years in, you know, we changed the team, and those transitions are tough, but yeah, I mean, everyone.
I think they can be really,
great things.
Obviously, again, understanding that there's some, and understanding that there's always some trade-offs, right? So of course, because a particular leader may have had one strength and then, you know, someone else doesn't. So there are always trade-offs. But to me, the gains almost always, and I think in some of these, you know, examples, it's interesting to think through kind of what are the things that feel novel, right? So someone did something one way and someone led an organization in their style and with their priorities. And as long as the mission and the vision stay the same, which hopefully is not very malleable, there's really interesting room for creativity, and someone else can bring very different strengths. So it can be messy in some contexts. Thankfully, in our case, I don't feel like it was. But to me, it's really exciting for the project, not just for the person. Like for me, the exciting thing was, yes, I would like a different chapter and a different challenge, but this could also be a really incredible opportunity for a project I care about. Yeah.
You know, and what's interesting, I mean, you have been involved in, or, you know, helped launch a bunch of other things as well. I mean, I have to say that, you know, looking at you from afar, sometimes I think, you know, when does this woman sleep? Because, you know, you have the awesome foundation chapter, Aminta Ventures, which you know, is helping to empower and educate female angel investors, and then, you know, you have a bunch of other stuff. Are any of those projects things that you felt like you were, you know, you wanted to potenciar, wanted to focus on a bit more, or are you really just thinking about, you know, what's sort of your thought pattern in terms of, you know, how to, what you're going to be focusing on? I
think that's one of the questions that I want to evaluate once I kind of take a little bit more of a break. So my immediate plan is to take a small sabbatical and really
rest. A small
rest.
Sabbatical for you. A week?
A couple of months.
Good.
But like disconnect, really, get those creative juices flowing. That's not, we all know, right? That's not something you can just turn on. Like you can't just like turn everything off and then turn it back on and like restart it and you're fine the next day. So I really want to spend a little bit of time doing that. And one of the questions for me is really, okay, so I have been very fortunate to be able to launch a variety of projects, all of them around different topics, but very similar underlying themes. All of them are topics that I really care about. Some of them I've already handed off because, I've run them for periods of time and now someone else runs them. And again, feel really great about that. But are any of them things that I want to grow? Because to me, one of the things that I do feel very clear about when I look at the next chapter is that I want to grow something, because most of my experience has been launching things. Even internally, when I worked more in the corporate sector, the things that were in my purview were, so we've never done this before, let's figure out how to do it. It was very launch related. And I love that energy. I love the complexity of those tasks. I've learned to thrive and really seek out those environments. So now to me, the interesting next challenge is, what are the skills? What are the processes? What do I need to be doing and rethinking and doing differently to actually grow a venture as opposed to launch a venture? Because it's there's some overlap.
That reminds me, Peter Thiel, has that, I think he wrote a book like 0 to 1 and then 1 to 100, right?
Yeah.
And I realize I get very excited about the, 0 to 1. I mean, I find that's magical. It's almost like, the fact you can sort of think about an idea and then, 6 months later or a year later, it like exists. And 2 years later, people in the community just think it's sort of, always needed to be there. And you realize, no, if it hadn't been for 3 people actually doing the work, this wouldn't be here. But then, that scaling for me at some point is, I'm less excited about. So it's sort of interesting that you're interested in helping scale something.
Yeah, I think part of it to me is a little bit, and who knows, right? Like maybe my next chapter will include that and I will conclude, we'll talk about this 4 years after and I'll say, well, that was really great, but now I'm ready to launch again.
Right. Exactly.
Who knows where that will lead. But I do think for me, there's a personal, and I think it's really exciting. And I definitely think once I rest, I will have the energy in the creative space to tackle kind of learning different processes and what I think I know how to do well currently for a different set of circumstances. So a lot of it to me feels like a personal challenge in a good way, not like I'm going to do this for the sake of doing it, but it feels like a really interesting thing to explore. I agree with you. I have always found launching, I've always found the 0 to 1 to be, my word probably for it is intoxicating, right? I think it's so interesting and fascinating and you're making decisions and you don't have all the information and you're just kind of, there's a risk element to it that feels different. And when you're scaling something, you have a lot more information. So your decision-making processes should be different and there should be processes, not just I'm making this up. So it's,
and the risks, it feels like there's more risk. At least for me, because, I always look at the team, right? That is taking this leap of faith, on the idea, on what we were coming up with. I always feel just a huge responsibility to the team. So, when you're whiteboarding and coming up with ideas and it's, a chunk of it's my own money, I feel like I'm taking a risk, but it's my risk to take. Whereas, I think, as we say in Spanish, se me empieza a temblar un poco la mano. When I start having to factor in these people, and then I always think about their families and, their career paths. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't mind, screwing it up for myself, but when I'm screwing it up for other people.
Yeah. The stakes are different, right? Yeah. The stakes change. And that, I think that's also partly, it feels more complex in certain ways. I'm not saying it's more complex overall, but it has some different, that's what I mean. It has some different complexity. And so that's something that feels really exciting. So when I think about whatever it is that the next chapter is going to hold, it's definitely going to be coming from a bit of that starting point.
No, that's amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of MiamiTech. Obviously, as I said, I mean, I think there was a real inflection point when the CIC launched. My view was, we began about 10 years ago, nine years ago, helping to build some basic infrastructure with AGP, Miami Angels, with the lab, with Sign, with conferences, the Knight Foundation doing a lot of great stuff, bringing Endeavor to Miami. Um, the Launchpad, Venture Hive, all these different initiatives. When the CIC came in, it really felt to me like it was institutionalizing and, really doing things, at a different level. It seemed to me sort of, obviously the CIC, I guess, started in Cambridge and just, a lot of the other, projects were a bit more local. And, the CIC just sort of seemed to raise the bar. What's been your sort of sense in terms of the evolution the last, 3 or 4 years of MiamiTech? And, where do you think the trajectory sort of goes?
So, I mean, I think that we can talk about this. This could be, an hour-long podcast by itself, right? Just like diving into what we are seeing or not seeing. So I think my
we're going to be talking about who we're not seeing in the ecosystem in a second. Don't worry about that.
So I was like, okay, so I think my good news, I'll start with good news and then I'll kind of have a less good news, I guess, comment. But my good news is that I do feel, to me, I feel like the discourse, kind of the honest conversation has changed over the last handful of years. I think people are having more hard conversations about, you don't, like entrepreneurship isn't a spectator sport. You don't just get a gold star because you had an idea and you thought about it for 3 years and maybe did something, right? Like we're expecting, maybe not requiring, but we're expecting the companies and the tech ecosystem to deliver viable companies that are not just viable in Miami or not just viable because we all know people and we like them as individuals, but that are viable as real companies in the real world. Right. And I think, several of the institutions that you mentioned, Endeavor, Miami Angels, et cetera, have played a role in consistently, slowly but surely raising that bar for the investor community, for the tech community, for the entrepreneurial community. To me, it is very palpable. The conversation, I mean, I moved to Miami almost 8 years ago. It's going to be 8 years in a couple of months. And I think the conversation we were having was significantly less mature, and the expectations we had were significantly less mature. To me, the conversation matters, because if we can't have an honest discussion around, this is a problem, this company is not viable, I don't know, these founders don't work well together, whatever the topic is, I think we are hamstringing ourselves. So to me, number one, very noticeable that the honesty in the conversations, I think, is evolving. The less positive thing to me is that I think in some ways, I sometimes get the impression that we are plateauing a little bit, or a danger of plateauing, where I kind of see the same concepts over and over again, or the same people starting companies, which is not bad. That's, serial entrepreneurship is fantastic, but I'm not seeing enough kind of fresh, different things come across my desk. It goes through phases and it goes through cycles. And I would say on a good news front, there are definitely some exceptions in terms of particular industry verticals that I have absolutely seen are growing. For me, life sciences and health tech is one of those examples where I do think we've continued to build and turn out viable companies in life sciences and health tech as an ecosystem. Some of them are very under the radar, but I think, people do what they do, but they are, interesting and viable companies and innovative companies. And so I think, to me, the larger question is, are we plateauing, or are we in danger of plateauing? Why? What does that look like? What does that mean? And what are the drivers? Because what got us here may not be what's going to get us to the next iteration, the next chapter of that.
Yeah, no, I've definitely felt that way actually for the last, 5 years or so, that things have, plateaued a little bit. And it's interesting because, with this conversation about the lack of diversity in tech, which has been ongoing, but I think, definitely sort of has been, refocused given, the Black Lives Matter movement and these different things going on. It actually has had me begin to start thinking sort of what is our measure of success, right? Because I think, I'm embarrassed to say, a couple of years ago, if you'd given me a few drinks, well, you could probably have just given me one, since I don't really drink. I probably would have started talking after one. I would have said, yeah, look, I mean, when things got going 8 or 9 years ago, we had Open English come to Miami and raise $100+ million very quickly. We had .co get sold for about $100 million. Anyway, we had a number of things, sort of biggish successes that at least I think sort of showed that, hey, you can think big in Miami and actually accomplish things, right? And a few years ago, I would have said, yeah, what we're really missing is, a few big successes in Miami that really pan out, right? So Magic Leap's been amazing, but we'll see, and Chewy was amazing, but it didn't really have a big impact, And so, my thought was, a company like Live Ninja that got sold, but if it had gotten sold for, an extra 0 or 2 zeros more than it got sold for, it would have really, maybe gotten things going. What I realize now, as I think a little deeper on this issue, is that, if you're measuring success by, the most successful companies, and that, hey, we're really trying to, build an ecosystem where it's all about, building the next unicorn, I mean, that potentially is a measure of success. And I'm not sure we're really any closer to that now than we were 5 years ago. As I've, spoken with people like Brian Brackeen and Michael Hall, and, trying to continue to have, sort of more critical conversations about who's in the ecosystem and who's not, I actually start thinking that, maybe some of those, real more grassroots kinds of initiatives, we really need to support more, right? And even with like the Win Lab, which is, a great initiative that Babson University had for a number of years. I think it's moving more virtual now, like everything. But yeah, I really have started thinking that, maybe it is one of these things that you measure the success of the ecosystem, not by, the 3 most successful companies that come out of the ecosystem, but more about, how broad an ecosystem you can build. I mean, and obviously you guys at the CIC, with 80,000 square feet, we're servicing, the whole sort of gamut of the potential ecosystem.
Well, but, I think about it, to me, CIC serves as a little bit of a metaphor for this, because, especially because we keep using the word ecosystem, and in nature, ecosystems are defined by the plurality of the things that are in them, right? And the symbiotic dynamics between the very multiple players that make up those, environs in nature. And so to me, it's not an either or. I think it is a both and.
Right.
Because the and comes because I think when you try to do solve for multiple large questions, and I know this is like something that is familiar to you, the solutions will be different. The solutions will be inevitably different. We can't like cookie cutter the same thing for very different audiences and assume that it's going to work in terms of including and accelerating them. And so I absolutely think that we ideally would be thinking through how to make sure that our ecosystem is broader. Some of that I think is inclusion related, but some of that is also looking at, the lifestyle businesses that make up, the core of the small business community in South Florida, some of which has tech enabled elements and some of which does not. And what is it that those businesses need in order to thrive, right? Like the idea of entrepreneurship as economic development, I think is definitely about broadening that inclusion and access point and growth. It's not just like, let's broaden you having a seat at the table. It's like, let's broaden what benefits people derive and how they grow these companies and these businesses. But the other piece of this is those resources, those events, those conversations, those, whatever tools you unveil from your toolbox are not going to be most likely the tools that are going to help the, like really high impact founder think through
Right.
the really complex challenges ahead for a company that is launching in 4 countries in 2 months. And so what resources, like ideally,
Yeah,
I think
that's really
when I
a good
mean,
point.
to me, the plateau piece is kind of because I feel like we've somewhat, like the events and programming that we have across Miami, at CIC and many other places, feels like it's somewhat stalled around it's like hovering around the baseline of stage of conversation.
Right.
Feels like there's not enough plurality and feels like it's not evolving. Like we're doing a lot of content for early stage companies, for companies that are, raising their first round of capital. All of this is really important. We want these people to succeed, and this ripples outward. But that's not the same content that's going to be interesting to a serial entrepreneur who's on their 3rd venture, has
Right.
raised money before, and is thinking about something like really niche and really complicated in the tech space.
Yeah, no, I got to say one initiative. I don't think I can't get. I'm not sure she's gone so public about it, but there are a few initiatives. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think for me, what happens? There's some amazing people in Miami who are top 100 in tech, who live here part of the year, but they're not connected with the local tech ecosystem. They're flying, back and forth to New York on their private plane or to LA or San Francisco. But they're here 4 or 5 months a year. And, my thought has always been, in terms of what you're saying, that for the people who have, sold a company and are, launching, venture 2 or 3, or, they have a, small fund, or, they're here. And I agree, there isn't, sort of programming for them, but they don't really need program. What they need is a community of people like them, connecting with people like themselves, and then people who have even 2 or 3 or 4 steps further along, right?
Yeah.
My thought has been, how can we get those people who are spending time in Miami interested in the ecosystem?
I think we've talked about this before, for sure,
Right.
because to me, this is one of those things where, South Florida, we can talk about it, up and down, but the Tri-County area really has an incredible set of, I refer to it as raw materials, because we really do. We have so many things here that are conducive, not just to quality of life, which we all know kind of those data points, but that are conducive to, would be really great for an ecosystem that is trying to be entrepreneurial and tech focused and kind of evolve in that regard. One of those, and most of them I think are we're using, but we're underusing and underutilizing, are nowhere near optimizing. And one of these is really this like demographic pattern. Like I think about, for CIC. So CIC first, out of when we expanded from Boston in the US, because now we have international sites, but in the US, our first expansion was to St. Louis. And their project has been amazing. It's been really successful. It's part of one of, if not like the best example of a truly designed innovation district, I think, in the country, the Cortex Innovation District. So it has a lot of really amazing success things, but it's done that through a very concerted effort, despite demographic patterns that are in some ways kind of the opposite of Miami, right? Like who goes to St. Louis for a purpose other than an explicit reason to be in St. Louis?
Right.
Versus in South Florida, where you have people who come as, to winter here, come seasonally, split their time, have family here, come for an event and then stay. Any number of reasons why people are here, why we are attracting really like remarkable people with track records, and not just investment dollars, even though that's also true, but track records and expertise and inspiration capital. And what are we doing that makes these people intrigued to be here and actually participate?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I often, and this has been an ongoing challenge at Miami Angels, which is, I'm out on my boat and I look at all these amazing houses and I think, man, if we could get these people to spend,
who are these people?
If they could invest 5% of what they're spending on gas on their plane or their boat, fuel, 5% of your fuel costs a year, invest in local tech ventures, and we would have, after Silicon Valley and Israel, we would have the 3rd most robust early stage ecosystem in the country. And then, if we could get the 20 or 30, giant names in tech who, have seasonal homes here in South Florida to just, spend 2 hours a month, doing a lunch or, connecting in some way with the, Andres Morenos who are in Miami and, the kinds of entrepreneurs who are, very well known nationally, but, could probably still even scale a bit more. We would have the best tech ecosystem in the country. So no pressure, Natalia, but I'm counting on you to solve all of these problems.
Well, listen,
your next venture.
Here's the I have the same, first of all, I have the same feeling. I paddleboard once a week around the Venetian area. And I'm just like, who are these people?
At Sunset Islands. Come on, just paddle over. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll paddle over. But I'm always like, who are these people? And why don't we know them?
Like, it's funny because, with my fiance, I've gotten to know a lot of them. And I'm always like, what about tech? And they always look at me. Oh, there's tech down here.
Sure.
It's like, or they'll say something like, yeah, I've been to Wynwood. And I'm like, okay, that's a start.
Okay.
That's.
Well, here's the interesting moment that I think we've all been already perceiving. But the COVID reality has rippled in a variety of ways. One of those ways has absolutely been, a shift in the living patterns and the ways that, at least commercial real estate has a bunch of other implications, but in the residential market, right, all of these people who are thinking about either relocating in a temporary manner to places other than the cities that they're in, be they New York or the West Coast or whatever, or in a more permanent manner. I moved to Miami from New York, and I for sure know many of my New York friends who work in a variety of things that are interesting for us down here, who are currently residing in South Florida, weathering out the storm. They're working remotely. They're doing, the same thing that we're all doing. So this is not the moment that's the most conducive to community building, but it is the moment where all of these people are suddenly here or considering being here. They're buying homes. They're, relocating or considering relocating. I think it would behoove us to figure out how to really maximize that opportunity, because it's our regular opportunity. And then it's like ratchet it up a notch.
I'll kick that one to Raul and the Knight Foundation. Raul, I hope you're listening. That's a good takeaway. So, Natalia, how can we keep track of what you're doing and what you're up to?
Well, LinkedIn, Twitter, I'm hoping to kind of be a little bit more vocal and publish some articles over time once I, again, get my head a little bit cleared. So I'll definitely be participating. I'm not checking out. I'm not hiding in a cave to weather the next couple of months. I'm not hibernating. I'll definitely, my goal is absolutely to kind of take a break, but not to disappear and to check out of the ecosystem and the community. So
well, we need you. So I want you to know
on any of the social channels.
Okay. Well, Natalia, seriously, it's been amazing collaborating with you for the benefit of MiamiTech the last few years, and I really look forward to continuing.
Absolutely.
To do things with you and
ditto. Right back at you. And now that I know, I'm going to paddle over to say hello when you're
absolutely. Come visit. Hey, it was really fun. Thanks again.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Este fue otro programa de Aquí y Ahora, auspiciado por PAG Law, especialista en Venture Capital. Hasta pronto.